people over the head with a lead steel pipe, also known as Jeremy Subarito. And we're recording. So, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to Karate Without Belts. I'm John.
I'm Jeremy.
Welcome, folks. Hope everyone is doing well with the current situation and everyone's staying safe, social distancing. Jeremy, how are you handling all this?
Just hanging in there. I mean, one day at a time. Do what my bosses ask of me, and hang out with the kids, and that's about it. So
there's this situation really exposes kind of people's, what they can really gel together with their families, and some people can't exactly be with their families right now. So if you're lucky to work at home and be able to be with your family, really consider yourself lucky, and make sure you understand not everyone can do that.
Yep.
In Japan, they just declared a state of emergency, and so I think Monday will be the last day I actually go to work for a little bit, but we'll see what happens with all that. On a happier note, I guess, if you're a listener and you're kind of sick of just listening to us on YouTube, you have other avenues now. We have an RSS feed with SoundCloud, which connected to Google Play, which connected to Stitcher, which connected to Spotify, which connected to Cultbox. I don't know, if you get like one RSS feed, apparently it connects to a bunch of different things. So if you want to listen to us on any of those, you can now.
Very cool.
So with quarantine, how have you been doing with quarantine training?
I've kind of taken it upon myself the last week or so to really go over stuff that either I really don't go over very often or don't like. So that means, yes, I've been working with comma lately. So it's just kind of it's been it's been interesting, and it's been fun again. It hadn't been such a, I can't believe I'm working on that, going through that routine, but it's been fun because I've been trying to tie that into, how do I work with Sai? How do I work with Tanbo? How do I work with, even Nunchaku the same way and stuff, and kind of see where the similarities and differences are and stuff. So
are you putting a string on the comma and flinging it out and seeing what happens?
Man, I'm too old to do that. No, I'm not.
You're not a curse training yet?
No. I don't have that kind of room. It's just been kind of interesting to just kind of see the ties into stuff, and especially that one where I really, first off, I had to relearn the kata because it was pretty much gone. So it took a day or two to relearn that, and then go from there. But it's been, like I said, it's been actually fun. So that's cool. Now, am I going to expand my study on that? Probably not a lot, but I mean, it's provided me, just some different insights on some stuff. So, and that's been cool.
One of the most interesting insights I think I've ever heard on the comma is that there's too much emphasis on it being a double weapon when in fact it's just a single weapon.
Yeah.
I think that was one of the most interesting things I'd ever heard on it. It was an old Okinawan teacher, and he was straight up just said, why would anybody be doing a double comma kata? It makes no sense. Anybody who knows like what a comma is used for, sugarcane harvesting, they're not doing it with two commas. They're doing it with one comma.
So, I don't know. Maybe if you're harvesting meth or something around here, something that's just going absolutely nuts, maybe. But I don't know.
And finally, we're going to have the Karate Without Belts and Breaking Bad crossover nobody asked for.
Well, no, with all the stuff, a buddy of mine from my old days when I was working for one of the local hospitals, we were talking about a time when a guy came in on meth and took one of these computer on wheels and literally twisted it up like a pretzel. I mean, it was just it was almost like unbelievable. I mean, you couldn't believe somebody had that kind of strength to do that. Now, people who work in law enforcement and see that kind of stuff on a semi-regular basis, But anyway, sorry, I didn't mean to get off track on that, but it's just kind of.
That's an interesting non sequitur. So that's where people need to be. That goes into a bit of, you can't always rely when people. We'll talk about this another day, when people rely on quote unquote pressure point strike training, and that's not always going to work for X number of reasons. But
no. I mean, yeah,
we'll talk about that another day.
Well, yeah, I mean, I got to go with my favorite quote from a Clint Eastwood movie. Improvise, overcome, and adapt. This don't work. You better improvise, overcome, and adapt. So it's kind of anyway.
That guy did. He made a pretzel out of a computer. What are you gonna do?
Yeah.
Come on, what are you gonna do? Come on, make a hamburger out of a router. Go.
Yeah, exactly.
With my training lately has actually been really good. This week has been, I'll probably throw a picture of this up on the Twitter or the Facebook, but I believe I talked about this maybe a couple weeks ago. I was in our Nishimura, and I walked by what was effectively like a gas mask filter, and it was $25, and it was like, nah, I don't feel like spending $25 on that. Something that may or may not be, essential in this current time. Then I walked by a sledgehammer. I was like, you know what? I wanted that for a year. How much is it? $35? Sold. So, shows where my priorities were. But I've been able to adapt this using some Kobudo techniques. Been able to adapt it into a decent workout, and just been working on using different parts of Kobudo kata and Kobudo motions to just focus on like upper body work, because it's something I haven't really worked on probably in a decent 3 or 4 months, because I was focusing so much on running, and that kind of went the way it was because of all of this. But I think that's where we're going to kind of hopefully segue into our topic for the day.
Yeah, not from my previous discussion, no. So that's kind of.
Look, we're going to take the meth on pretzel, the pretzels on meth podcast to a different level at some point. But until we get to that episode, today we will talk about weapons and not ancillary training. What would be the best way to talk about this kind of training? Not necessarily weapons training, but.
Well, I don't know. I mean, as we kind of discussed, I think probably the best way to kind of frame it up would be the differences between, weights, balances of weapons and stuff.
Right.
And when to use what and things like that, and what the benefits are for both, on different scales. So.
Yeah, so we can get into this. I think we'll get into it from a Kobudo perspective, and then maybe branch out from there. Is that karate generally there is very in it of itself generally has no equipment needed. It's just nothing you really need for it. People like having uniforms, people like having gear and stuff, but generally, as long as you have the knowledge of it, you really don't need to have any equipment, supposedly. When it comes to actually, doing any sort of weapons training, you need the weapon. So I guess we can kind of start from, where everyone starts with is bow.
I don't know. I mean, not everybody. I would say probably kind of a guideline I think is probably used more often than not is, one weapon, two hands, bow, jo, nunchaku. Probably not normally Aku or Nuntebo or something like that.
Those are your specialty.
Yeah, that's. I mean, even trying to find a Nuntebo anymore is quite the challenge. But
it's expensive one of that.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, I mean that's kind of where a lot of people begin and stuff, and I think that's good because you kind of get used to your body moving with another object.
Right, and there has been I guess I want to put it this way, where if you can figure out the dimensions of the length in which you're striking, the length in which you're using the bow or using a Joe, or even less more dangerously so than a Nunchaku, I guess the bow can just be as dangerous. Then you can kind of figure out, get a decent spatial awareness for where you are. But then I guess the question is, what kind of bow do you start people with, and what kind of bow should you be using? Because with the advent of mass marketing of martial arts and all that stuff, vis-a-vis Century and whatnot, there's been a lot of interesting bows to be produced.
True. This is definitely true. Now, this would be probably I would start off, what's your purpose and what you're going to be doing? Are you actually learning how to move with the weapon, or are you learning to strike and literally defend with the weapon? I think if it's the latter, I use anytime I'm doing like a lot of striking, things like that with a bow or something like that, I want a rattan bow. I mean, just good, solid, sturdy, something that's not overly heavy, but just something. I mean, usually fairly light, but
Yeah.
It just makes sense to use that. But if you're learning how to use the actual bow itself, I mean, learn how to move, how to actually do the stuff, working more towards the kata side of the stuff. Personally, I think having something like a bow that's tapered on the ends a little bit. There are certain specifics for like what you and I use, but other people are a little different. But as far as weight and stuff, I mean, it definitely depends on the person, definitely. But you also don't want a toothpick either that you're just spinning around like a pinwheel either. So it's kind of.
I think no one's gonna get any sympathy from us from maybe saying I want to twirl it around really fast, like in a tournament or whatever. I don't support that view of training at all.
Well, I look at it like this. If that's what you want to do, cool. That's not what. I mean, as far as what I teach and how I train and how I work with people, that's not what I teach, and it's not how I train. So
that's not what I've learned.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so I think most people who come from a traditional vein would just say, nah, that's because at the end of the day, what is that doing? Like maybe you could use it to defend yourself, I guess, but if it's like gonna fall apart like Basel would, like.
Well, I mean, my favorite are the ones that are fiberglass and light up and all that kind of stuff. They're
fun.
I will say they're interesting. They're fun, and they're great things for 4th of July. But that's about it. But
yeah,
I don't know. That's just my take on it. But
I think the bow can, because the other side of this is what we've seen in recent years. You have a longer memory than I do on all this. When I first started really working with Kobudo, there was this like massive push for heavy exotic wood weapons that ended up like $60 to $100. Not saying these things are bad and we're going to get weapon quality, but like it's just the weird, one side is very much, yeah, get this, flashy bow or whatever. And then like the more quote unquote serious traditionalists are like, you need the most exotic South American wood you can find that's as dense and heavy it can withstand a bullet, which is almost nonsense to think about it now when I heard this. So it's just kind of like you have these like two opposing sides where obviously one is clear for tournaments. I feel like traditional people were kind of sold on this idea that the heavy weapons, like heavy bows and stuff like that, are important.
I think there's definitely some merit to it.
Yeah.
Because but not just heavy. What I like, now am I guilty of said doing so? Yes, I I am. I've got a collection of weapons in a wood called Morgillo. And it's about as dense as Coca-Cola. Not quite, but almost. I just like it because I just like the feel of it. That's just me. I just like it. But when I went to go have my bow custom made in that, one of the main things was balance.
Yeah.
I mean, I wanted it balanced in a specific way. I wanted it balanced basically dead on, so that, I mean, even though it's quite a bit heavier than my other bow, but yeah, I mean, it's still balanced. So therefore, the thing about it is with that extra weight on it, I can't really. One of the things I've learned with the heavier weapons is I can't cheat on the techniques. I have to make it move the way the technique is supposed to move. Period. I did that with. Actually, I did that with my Joe that was made out of that, and really messed up my shoulder for a good long time. It took a long time to heal.
And that brings up the question then, is this view of having heavier Cobidol, having heavier stuff like Joe's and bows, Tombow, and whatever kind of wooden weapons, making them as heavier workout tools rather than technique practice tools, is this actually more hindering training or making things worse, or is it making things better?
See, I maybe I'm old school. I do think it is better in that aspect, because, like I said, you're actually making that, you're practicing to get that technique down the way it's supposed to be done. Period. I look at the different kinds of side that I've got. I've got one that's significantly heavier than the other one. I have to do the technique correctly. I cannot cheat on it. Otherwise, I usually end up dropping it if I don't do the technique correct, because it's that heavy on me, or heavy for me. I mean, if I'm playing, I can't play around with those at all. I have to do it a specific way. And I think in that aspect, it's good, because the other thing that I've found, especially if I add on that they're balanced.
Right, rather than just being made to be heavy.
Right, because like if I pick up, oh geez, if I pick up another, like let's say, just go back to a bow.
Right.
I mean, with working with the bows that I've got, but both of them are very bad, or the two that I mainly work with are extremely balanced. Almost about, for me, they're about as good as it gets. If I pick up another bow, whether it's a rattan bow or or a stick, I can find the balance on it very, very quickly, and I can adjust it to however I work a technique. Maybe my hands are slid just a little bit more this way or that way, or whatever, but I'll make it work however I need to. But
Yeah. And so with that though, that means that there's finesse training that you can do with the supposed like normal weapons or lighter weapons, right? Or even experimental training, trying out a movement. But when you're actually doing it more for keeps, as it were, that's where the heavier weapons make more sense in that regard.
right, absolutely, absolutely. Or at least I think so. I mean, somebody else may have a different viewpoint on it, but I mean, that's seemed to work best for me over the years. So.
Well, and then so does that, and so let's get into a little bit on like strength training, right? So
Okay.
a lot of people, some people would say it is one of the cardinal sins of karate training has been there has been less focus on actual fit. And this depends on where you are, but and who you're training with. But a lot of people think you just do karate, you're strong enough to, you don't need to be stronger. You don't need to do any sort of real like calisthenic training or bodyweight training or even weight training. to build up your body, all you need is karate. All you need is the forearms and the exercises, and you'll be built up just fine enough. Is the weapon? Do you feel like the weapons training, especially with the kind of more modified, heavier weapons, made from these heavier woods, kind of addresses that in a better way than just, I don't know, the regular weapons or the rattan weapons or stuff like that?
It's definitely a good question. One I've really never really thought about, to be perfectly honest. But I do think you do get some benefits from that if you want to continue to do supplemental training, whether it's extra cardio, extra strength training, weights, whatever, isometrics. I think that's up to each individual. And I think it goes back to something we've talked about, in the past. What is your goal out of your training? What do you want to accomplish out of it?
Well, and I think where this goes to, though, is not to counter that point at all, but is more the assumption that I do kata, I do karate, I do kobudo, ergo I don't need these other forms of training. That this form of training is good enough, right?
I would say, is it good enough? Yes, but I don't think you can rely on the same thing day in day out. You're going to have to change that.
Sorry, apparently a 747 jet is flying over my house.
Oh wow, that's cool. I think.
I don't think so. Probably some base guys are getting a little too antsy, and so they were like, "Well, if we can't get out of quarantine one way, we'll get out another." I haven't really seen that yet, but I'm looking forward to when that happens. So sorry, could you repeat your point?
No, I got you. Is it good enough? Yes, but I don't think you can do the same thing, the same speed, the same this, same that every day, day in, day out.
Right.
You've got to look at it from a little bit of an analytical perspective, and sometimes changing things up is good to increase your cardio capabilities and things like that while you're doing this. I don't think that's a bad thing. You can also do katas isometrically, and if you've never done a bow kata isometrically, and you want a really intense strength workout,
isometrics with a heavy bow.
Doesn't matter. Probably light bow, otherwise you might pass out. No, yeah. I've done that a handful of times. That's pretty intense. That or working with the Subarito, doing that isometrically. Man, yeah, that'll burn your arms.
So this is something that I think it's not unique to how we were trained, but it is something that I don't see other karate people do. And it's not something I've seen, at least where I've seen kendo, it being done. You're the one who actually introduced this training to me. So how about you talk about Subarito a little bit? Because I think that's it's an interesting topic, because it kind of it shows the cross training that already exists in some karate. But just for those who are not in the know, what's a Subarito? Is it a burrito that is so good you have to put a soup before?
Yeah, it's a super burrito. We used to joke about it, and it's like, let's do super burrito training. No, a super burrito is basically a heavy wooden sword. It's not a bokken. It's larger than a bokken is.
A shinai.
Yeah, and basically, what's interesting is group around here. What we've done is usually we'll have one made where somebody goes in and cuts holes in the end of it and usually fills it with lead. So like usually there's several people who are gunsmiths and things like that, and they'll take shot lead, melt it down, and put it in there. And therefore, trust me, you want some heavy training, that'll do it. I do have a buddy of mine who his is got lead all the way down it. So it's I don't know how I've picked it up a couple times. He's let me try to do just basic strikes, and I can do about maybe 10, and that's about it. It's pretty intense. But what you're really doing is really working on your technique, not only from a weapon standpoint, but also from an empty hand standpoint. And you're like, how are you doing that? And I mean, the best way to do it is you just got to go through training. I mean, that's the main thing of it. I mean, there's in the exercise that I learned with it, there's a total of it's a 12 strike combination basically, and it basically it covers just basic strikes. And if you look at how our weapons are set up, all of them have those movements in almost all the weapons. So a lot of times it's really good to do that to begin with before you even start on bow, Joe, nunchaku, sai, tonfa, kama, aku, whatever else you're going to pick up.
Right.
So I think that fairly well explained it. I mean, that's
No, but, I mean that's not training that I think is very popular to many karate styles or many people who've experienced. But I've never seen a suiyorito in an Okinawan dojo. That doesn't mean they don't exist. I personally have never seen them, but I've never seen them like they're not popularly used. Like a good example is like what's one of the most popular styles of karate is like Kyokushinkan, and the Kyokushinkan people are just like, we ain't using, like Kobudo don't exist. Like they might import it from somewhere, but they, with all of the heavy calisthenic work they do, all the heavy Jiu Kumite stuff they do not touch the weapons at all. So, and just to think if like you had Kyokushin guys doing that, that would probably make their striking a lot harder.
no, I get it. I mean, some of the other things that it helps out with is basic footwork and things like that, and just gets you used to having something in your hands while you're moving. So, I mean, and you can relate that to whether it's a weapon or somebody's arm or or whatever. So it just kind of it's just a real basic fundamental exercise that's really good. I mean, and I'll be perfectly honest, I try to do that exercise at least once or twice a week. So even to this day, and that's 30 years later, I still try to do that. So
could this exercise just be done with a basic boken?
oh, sure. I mean, you can do it with a Joe too. I mean, it's not. I mean, the main thing is to get everything lined up, and I think that's going into a little bit of our earlier conversation. I think that sets a foundation to show what balance is,
right?
Or be able to feel balance with an object or a weapon and things like that. So
do you think object balance, kind of no matter what the weapon is, like we could just take somebody who has never picked up a weapon and, for example, give them one of the more unpopular weapons, tonfa, and because if there's a weapon that requires hand balance, as it were, that one's kind of in particular. I've seen some interesting kind of, I guess the best way to put it is like fat tongue tonfa, where the ends of the tonfa are not tapered off, but in fact made wider.
Yeah, that's another weapon that's not one of my go-to or one that I practice on a regular basis. But the one thing I will say, this has been my experience, not somebody else, totally different. It seems like to me the heavier the tonfa, the better balanced it seems they are, and the better I'm able to work with them.
Do you think that a good example would be like the spins people tend to like to do with the tonfa?
Well, I mean, whenever you are doing the spins with the tonfa, I mean, you're definitely more in control with one that's heavier than one that's lighter. I mean, it seems like it just kind of goes all over the place if it's lighter. If it's heavier, I've got a lot more control with it. So either that or I'm scared to death it's going to fly out of my hand. I don't know, one of the two. But either way, it seems like I got more control over one that's heavier.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Although I'm not really sure if the interesting strategy of having the fat tongue ones are more like just smash, 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 rather than like the supposed finesse that we've been taught with the tonfa is kind of like getting in and hooking and stuff like that, which
Yeah,
on is
yeah, I don't know. I mean, I'm probably the last one to speak on it, but I mean, other than that just seems that and nunchaku. I'll be perfectly honest. If I've got a heavier set of nunchaku, it seems that I've got a lot more control over it. Every time I've either hit myself in the head or wherever else, it's been with a pair of nunchaku that's been a lot lighter. It's like I just don't have the control over them.
well, and there's I am a good friend of ours, Steve, has a I think for his birthday present or Christmas present one year, gave me possibly one of the heaviest pair of nunchaku I've ever had. And I haven't turned back. I haven't like I got up. I had to get a pair when I initially came to Japan. I couldn't get that pair. I couldn't bring that pair over with me, so I got kind of a stock pair. And what was interesting is I experienced kind of the same issue you had. They were like super light and kind of hard to control. And I remember I was at a gym and I was just like, well, we'll see if they freak out over me pulling out nunchaku. No one kind of, it was in a big open room. It had a bunch of mirrors. Didn't really seem like a big deal. But pull out the nunchaku, start doing some nunchaku kata. It's maybe the third, fourth time I've been using this nunchaku, and kaboom! The nunchaku was so loosely laced, and kind of the strikes that we do with it are kind of tight come back, right?
Right.
To the point where the end of the nunchaku just flew against the mirror. Thankfully, didn't break it or crack it or anything else.
Yeah.
And I just picked it up and I'm like, and we're done.
Yeah, we're done with that. Yeah. Thank you. Tip your waitress. I'm out of here. I got you. No, that's yeah. I mean that and tonfa, I would say probably the heavier ones seem to really be more under control than if I've got a light pair. It just doesn't seem like they're balanced at all. I'm looking over at my wall. I've still got my pair of Sharado nunchaku I bought, how long ago? 28 years ago? Yeah. So it's 28, 29 years ago. So, I mean, I still, when I work with nunchaku, I still work with those. I mean, those are the ones I work with. But, after 29 years, I've kind of gotten used to them too. So go figure.
Do you feel that using these weapons kind of inherently builds the kind of strength that you're looking for as a martial artist, or do you feel there might be an incidental hindrance when using them? I have my own thoughts on this, but
I don't know. I mean, I could be wrong. I mean, I feel like I build quite a bit of strength just using just the weapons alone. Especially if I'm doing Subarito training. If I'm doing that, I'd say that and psi work mostly with those two alone. I mean, because I can definitely feel if I haven't worked with my psi in a week or so, my forearms just don't feel tight. But whenever I've worked with the psi, it feels like my forearms just get tighter and tighter and tighter. Same way with like my shoulders with the Subarito. It just seems like my shoulders are definitely stronger. My arms seem to be, I wouldn't say bigger, but it just seems my stamina with that is much greater. So
it builds the muscles in a different way, I feel. And I think that's where the great quality of it is. Where even if it's not super heavy, like psi is a great example. A couple years back, I had friends who were kind of going bananas over like these like heavy psi people were creating, which I feel might have their uses in some instances, but don't exactly work with other techniques. Or
Yeah,
it depends on your strategy. I feel like definitely the make of the weapon also really counts, which goes back to what you're talking about balance.
I'll never forget, what was it? We were at some camp together, and somebody brought up a pair of Psy to me. They wanted me to take a look at it, and I mean, I will say this. I mean, they were very pretty. They were really nice
Yeah.
until I actually put my hands on them, and I'm like, I mean, I literally did one strike with them. I handed them back to the person, and they're like, well, what's up? And I'm like, these things are not balanced worth a damn. I mean, sorry, I don't even say that, but I mean, it just was flat out not balanced. And I mean, it was so off. I mean, even a cheap pair of Century Psi, and I'm not knocking those. Those are great training tools, and that's why I learned on. But sometimes the proper balance isn't quite there. It's not bad, but it's not quite there. No,
Right.
I mean, you're talking the difference between a $30 pair of Psi between and a $300 or $400 pair of Psi. It's different. It's kind of like, if you're buying a 1985 Honda Civic as opposed to a 2020 Lamborghini. It's going to be balanced a little bit different. And it is, but I mean, I felt bad for the guy because the guy paid almost $200 for these Psi.
I think it was more. I think it was getting closer up to like 3.
You know what I'm talking about, and I mean, they were cool. I mean, they were neat, but they weren't balanced. And what was interesting is afterwards, somehow I got on an email chat with the guy who made them, and I told him, I'm like, look, your balance on these are off. I mean, you can't do certain techniques if you've got the balance where they're at. It just won't work, period.
Right.
It won't right. I mean, and then you're going to force it. And then, I mean, as well as I do, you force a technique, you're asking for trouble one way or another.
And especially if you're doing it with these like with these heavy weapons and stuff like that. And this is where the danger is, where you don't understand. Like if you're like heavy weapon training, here we go, and even if you don't have the stamina to do that kind of heavy weapon training, you shouldn't be running into it and running after it like a moron. Like
Yeah, I mean,
there's got to be like weight training. There needs to be a progression because it's essentially what it is.
Yeah, I do agree with that. I think I think balance is probably the most important.
Right.
Know where your balance is with the weapon, things like that, and then from there you can adjust whatever weight you want. I mean, don't get me wrong. I've got I'd say a medium weight Psi, and then I've got a heavy Psi that I work with. The one thing I mean, I like the heavy Psi to a point, but there's part of it that because my hands are so big, part of it will start digging into my hand a little bit, and I'm just like, and I can work with it for a little bit, but I can't work with it for a long period of time. It just drives me nuts. So I mean, I'll work with it for a couple times, and then I'll go back to the medium Psi, and I'll see if something's changed or if I'm doing something not quite right. So it kind of helps me keep on balance on those medium Psi, that I'm doing my techniques right. So that's kind of the main thing.
You have to also balance the weapon to the person, because if it doesn't fit you, it's probably not a good idea to be working with that weapon for too long. So,
right,
but
absolutely.
that doesn't mean people need to be smart about this and not be spending $5,000-$7,000 on bespoke custom weapons. It's not to say that people think them are bad. It's not to say that these are bad weapons or anything. But I've seen some people just go crazy spending on like these weapons for they don't necessarily like, they just maybe started a weapon and they were sold this, and it's like they don't need this big heavy weapon right now. They need to actually learn how to use the weapon, and then maybe down the line go get that. But
Right. I mean, it's been interesting. I mean, in the past, I mean, I've had different instructors just literally pick up different weapons that I've got. I mean, specifically bow, sai, manji sai, things like that. Because I mean, I've got several pair of sai, and most of them are very, very closely bound. I mean, they're very close. And so a lot of times somebody will pick those up like, wow, okay, I actually, I remember at one of the summer camps that we went to, one of the guys was just picking up a stick, and literally pretty much just picked up a stick like a broom handle and was working with I think one of the bow katas and stuff, and he goes, "Oh, it's just a stick," and I'm like, "No, no, 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 no. You need to understand, it's not just a stick. There's a little more to it." And I said, "Come with me." And so I'm like, "Okay, this is what you're using." He goes, "Yeah," and I'm like, "Okay, now here's something that's balanced. Feel the difference." And I mean, the guy was just like, it was almost like his mouth was watering, literally, he was like, wow. He goes, I never knew there was that big of a diff. I mean, he could feel it. And on a good weapon, you will feel it. It's not a stick. It's
right.
A weapon.
And that kind of finesse is not something like it's understood by arts that are very like a good example is like Aijutsu or Kenjutsu. Those guys understand like sword is made a particular way. It's crafted a particular way. It's taken care of in a particular way. It's stored in a particular way. And kind of what makes is kind of the nice refined metropolitan versus the farmer guy. Hey, look, I got a stick with a pitchfork on it. It almost feels like the two mentalities don't exactly go well together.
Right.
So that's why when you have those guys coming over into karate, they just don't understand what the mentality. But at the same time, karate guys need to kind of understand you need to take care of your weapons the same way those guys take care of their swords.
Right. Absolutely.
It's not just a stick.
No, yeah. And I mean, if you just want to learn something and just want to learn just the basics of something and don't want to progress any further, fine. No, cool. Get it. I mean, I'll be perfectly honest. My kama is in that category. So that's one of the few weapons I've never gotten specially made. But maybe I'd appreciate it more if I did. I don't know, but probably still not.
And it's also a matter of unlike sword, we can actually use those weapons, get those weapons for relatively cheaper, and there's a lot less that has to go into actually making them to actually be usable and learn them and stuff like that. As opposed to other arts where you need the quality of something in order to use it. So I don't have any sort of hate towards that or anything, but I feel there's a decent balance that needs to be strict between it's just something disposable as opposed to something that you have to spend ends up being a $500 sunk cost every year or something.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, I'm
cool.
I'm glad I bought all this stuff a long time ago before inflation was hit on it. So I'm thankful for that. So, but
yeah, and there's some great weapons makers out there. There's some there's some really great weapons makers out there. None of which we're going to plug on the show right now. My advice to people is just know what you need. Don't go rushing off to buy something you don't need, and understand. If you're going to not blow money, but if you're going to spend money in that regard, know what you actually want. Know what you're actually going to be using it for. Don't buy it and then not use it.
Absolutely. Yeah, I've got one new bow that I've got that it's the one I really don't use, but whenever I teach somebody, I do have them use it just because I had it set up a certain way to where they can it makes it easy for them to see where the tines are or feel where the tines are going to be at. And that's the only reason why I do that. But, so, and personally, I'll tell you this, I'll say this, it's very pretty, but I really hate it. I really hate it. I hate working with it, but it does. I mean, I will go and work with it a little bit, like if I'm working with it and I like my other ones and my tines just seem like they're off quite a bit, I'll go back and work with it just a little bit. Okay, this is what I'm doing wrong, and I'll get the feel down to where it's like, okay, I gotta go back and do this, and this. So that's just one of them. So
cool. Anything you want to say in closing on this topic, or?
I guess the thing of it is heavy's good, but too much of a good thing is not always good. I mean, I've watched people buy weapons that were way too heavy for them, and it would literally almost strain their muscles to the point where they couldn't do anything with it. So know where that happy medium is. I mean, don't push yourself a little bit, but don't push it to the point of potential injury or complete muscle fatigue or just exhaustion. I mean that's the best thing I can think of about it. So
yeah, it's understanding that also if you're using kind of a regular weighted weapon at a regular, at regular speeds and stuff like that, and you can make a kata work or make movements work regularly, then you can start using heavier stuff. But like weight training, you have to build up to those points.
And sometimes if you're using a weighted weapon, sometimes your movements are going to be a little bit slower. They are, but make sure they're correct.
Yeah, and it's not about being fast.
No, and I think that's where some people get a misnomer on it. It's like, I can work just as fast with these. Well, maybe not.
Well, that. What is it? A couple of weeks ago, we were talking about how I mentioned something along the line of like that no katas feel longer than regular empty hand katas. And like, yeah, it's because also I was doing 2 nunchaku katas on a heavy nunchaku.
Yeah.
Cool. So Jeremy, what do you think you're going to be working on as our world changes to being more stay at home? More kana?
Well, yeah. I mean, it's been, like I said, it's actually been a pleasant, training experience. Again, I can't remember the last time it was. It had to been at least 20, 25 years ago. Yeah, I'll definitely be working more of that. For some reason, there have just been a couple katas that have just really stuck out in my mind that I really need to work on this week. Just empty hands. So mainly Pasai and Nisei Shi. And just seems like it's been a little bit longer for me to really work with those, and I really need to get back on those for some reason. Just something's just kind of itching that direction. So usually whenever something itches that direction, I'll just kind of, okay, time to let's see what's going on there. See what I'm supposed to be getting out of that. So
I feel you on the Pasai and Nisei Shi bit on that. I felt like one thing I'm slowly looking at, and I can only be done slowly, I can't do it quickly, is trying to kind of look at the hard wiring between left and right side of kata and stuff like that. That's kind of what people say all the time. Not always really done is like, do kata left side and then do kata right side the same way. And so just trying to look at do the same motions on both sides and kind of looking at that hard wiring that gets put into you when you do a kata only a certain way for as long as you do. So slowly working on that.
No, that's cool.
Cool. Well, folks, thanks for listening. Remember, we are a little more out there in the world in terms of podcasting and in terms of being able to be listened to in different places. So hopefully you're picking this up somewhere good. And we hope wherever you are, please stay safe and don't forget to keep training.